The NEC is very much about collaboration, getting the parties to work together, and a lot of that's based on personalities and trying to draw the parties into communicating more effectively and looking at forward-thinking project management. Now, one of the clauses I think that goes against that idea is the right of the project manager to remove an employee of the contractor from site or exclude him from being part of the project at pretty short notice. How does that really sit for you, John, within the framework of the way the NEC works?
Well, I think contractually you have to look at it and say, well, actually, if the project manager does do that, then it's the contractor's obligation to provide a replacement, and if that replacement isn't up to speed, then potentially the contractor's side of the bargain doesn't work as well and the contractor's at risk. But actually, the reality is it's the employers, and the project manager to some extent represents the employer's risk, that if they get rid of someone who they don't like, that the disruption to progress on site and the fact that they might get someone who they still don't like, that will impact on their project. So in that sense, it's almost a shared risk. Just out of the blue saying, I don't like that person, remove them, which contractually the project manager could do, is pretty extreme.
I mean, I think you're right, and I think the only caveat that you'd ever put onto that clause is it has to be a legal reason. So you couldn't fall foul of the Discrimination Act, for example. So you can't exclude someone for race, sex, colour, anything like that. But beyond that, it could be anything, and you don't even have to give a reason, which is quite unusual under the NEC. Usually there does need to be a reason or an explanation as to why. Why do you think?
I think you can. The project manager has to state their reasons, but there's no contractual reasons. It could be I don't like them.
Yeah.
Well, I've given a reason,
and
that's fine, but there's no accepted reason.
Yeah, and also there's no downside if he doesn't give reasons or if his reasons are very wishy-washy. I mean, the contractor still has to remove his personnel, which can create quite a lot of disruption to the programme of delivery of the works. But who bears that risk and the additional cost of bringing in a new person and the delay that might cause, Ian?
Well, I think it would depend upon the main options. If you look at an option A or B, where you've got like a fixed price or bill, then the contractor will get paid no more for the cost of that replacement person. If you're looking at C, D and E, and it leads to increased defined cost, then potentially that could be shared through a pay and gain or paid under an option E. Because I don't think you can link a disallowed cost to the additional costs incurred by the contractor. So that risk is going to be shared or actually borne by the employer in some cases. But just come back to the sort of principle of this. I mean, for me, I just don't see why a project manager would want to exercise this power, vexatiously. Why would they want to sort of exclude someone for the sake of it? You'd have thought they'd have to have a reason. Because as John's already said, it could cause disruption, it could cause problems. And even under an option A where contractors risk, the employer wants the job finished on time. If the contractor's losing money, they're going to look to recover it in some way. So for me, yeah, it's a powerful clause, but I think there would be a level of realism over how it's applied in practice.
Well, I've seen it used in practice, and it was basically used because the project manager didn't like the as far as he saw it, the contractual stance that the contractor was making, issuing early warning notices, etc. Didn't like that, didn't want to receive them. So they moved the contractor's representative out using this clause.
So he's used as a big stick?
Yes. And I take all the points you're saying. I mean, is that truly helpful to the project? Arguably no. But I think actually the contractor probably shares more of the risk, subject to it being part of a pay and gain mechanism under clause C, option C and D. But I think it's more disruptive that the contractor then has to replace that person. There's a disconnect, there's a learning curve to go through, etc. And there's a different style of management. And all because potentially the other side is saying, well, don't like your contractual tactics, therefore I'm going to remove you.
So if that does happen, I would say you've probably got some sort of, if not contractual breakdown, then relationship breakdown on that project. How would you go about fixing it, John?
Well, I think you have to start to go back to root causes, and that might be education, as in, so in your example, I don't like early warnings, because perhaps the project manager saw them as setups for claims, compensation events. So that's a matter of education. That's partly culture, mindset, and so on. So that's part of the education. It could be due to systems. It could just be, the one instance I know of is where the person was working at an airport, and after a series of breaches related to health and safety, they decided to drive across their Land Rover across one of the main runways at Heathrow without getting permission. And that was the final straw, which I think is justified. So it's fixed the causes of that. And that could just be team dynamics as well. And I do actually know of some projects where people have said, it's just these two people aren't getting on. And we can't really do blame, it's just they're not getting on. So we do actually, at a higher level, need to remove one of them. And more often than not, it's the contractor who's volunteers the person.
Yeah. I think just sort of summarising that, I think from my perspective, I think the right of the project manager to remove someone isn't contractual necessity, sort of going back to John's example of clear health and safety breaches. You've got to have a way of excluding someone from the site who really shouldn't be there. But I think it has to be looked at in context if the removal of someone is a pretty nuclear option. And in doing that, one, you've got to have pretty good reason, at least clear in your own mind, better even if you can communicate it to the other parties in the project so that everyone understands why you're getting there. But nevertheless, even if you do all understand why, it's probably at that point that you just want to reassess how your relationship's working and just, are we in the right place? Have we got the right people? Is the dynamic still working? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.